I think it's hard to deny that the current real estate market is a bit of a mess these days, especially for first-time homebuyers. I think it's safe to say that the most unexpected outcomes of the pandemic has been the unexpected boost to the housing market across the country. And while certain areas have experienced more intense activity, the overall trend is one of the hottest real estate markets in history. And while it has contributed to a rise in overall household wealth, it has posed challenges for those looking to buy a new home, especially first-time home buyers who are clearly at a disadvantage here. And why are they at a disadvantage? Well, if someone owns a home and wants to go and buy a new one, they can just sell their current house for a good price and buy the new one at a similarly high price, kind of evening out the overall cost. The only problem they might face is higher interest rates. However, first-time home buyers have it tougher. They not only have to tackle the high interest rates, but they also have to contend with soaring home prices. Clearly, they are at a disadvantage. Be very careful that you're not stretching yourself too thin financially during the home buying process, especially in the current environment. But let's say you've done your research and you're ready to buy a home. Here are some useful tips for you. First and foremost, know your mortgage options. Many people think that they have to put down 20%, and that's just not true. While 20% is always a good idea, you can go as low as 0% as well. For example, FHA mortgages backed by the Federal Housing Administration only requires 3.5% down, and VA mortgages for veterans and active duty military members don't require any down payment. Some conventional loans only require 3% down. Most states also offer assistance programs for first-time home buyers with moderate to low incomes to cover down payments and closing costs. And this honestly is something I wasn't aware of when I first purchased my house. Then one often overlooked option is the USDA loan, which requires 0% down payment. The only catch is that the property needs to be in a rural area. And before dismissing this option, check the USDA's website for the interactive map and see if the area you are interested in qualifies as a rural area. Some locations are just outside big cities, like two of my rentals, which are somewhere in this area, are literally 20 minutes away from McKinney, Texas. I personally used an investor loan for both of these properties, but if you're looking for a primary residence, you have choices. Research thoroughly before ruling out the USDA option. Next, seller financing may be a good option in a high interest rate environment. If you're buying a home for the first time, understanding this concept might be a bit tricky. However, for those who have experience in seller financing, they will tell you just how good of an option it can be for both the buyer and the seller because you're cutting out the middleman, which is the bank. In simple terms, seller financing in real estate is where the person selling a property acts as a lender for the buyer. Instead of the buyer obtaining a mortgage loan from the bank or any other traditional lender, the seller provides financing for the purchase. The buyer makes payments to the seller, typically with an interest, until the full purchase price is paid off. This arrangement can be an alternative for buyers who may have difficulty securing a traditional mortgage, or for sellers who want to make their property more attractive to potential buyers by offering flexible financing options. Now you might be wondering, okay, how does this benefit the buyer, or how does this benefit the seller? Why should you go through all this hassle? I'll tell you why. The seller, opting for seller financing, enjoys a consistent monthly income as payments are spread over time. And by choosing this approach, sellers can step aside substantial capital gains that would arise from a lump sum cash out, a very important consideration for many sellers. In addition to receiving the sale amount for the property, sellers will also earn an interest on the provided loan, ensuring an ongoing cash flow. Also, since the seller is acting as the lender, sellers mitigate risk by having the right to foreclosure to the property in an event of a buyer default, providing the seller with the protections similar to that of a traditional bank. So for a seller, it's a great deal. But what about the buyer? What if you want to buy a house and buy it through seller financing? What are the benefits that you get? First, easier qualification. Traditional lenders often have very strict criteria for mortgage approval, including credit scores, income verification, and down payment requirements. Then you also have lower closing costs compared to a traditional mortgage. You also get a faster closing process because there's just no involvement of a traditional lender. And finally, you have the potential for lower interest rates. While not always the case, some sellers may offer competitive or even lower interest rates compared to a traditional lender. This can result in a long-term cost saving for the buyer. Seller financing can be a bit complicated, so I would strongly suggest working with a realtor who specializes in this. Which brings me to the next point. Consider working with a reliable real estate agent. They can assist you in discovering suitable properties, making offers, and negotiating with the seller. And don't just rely on realtor.com or Zillow.com. If you work with a realtor, they have access to MLS. For those who are unaware, an MLS is just a database of home listings. It's a lot more powerful than Zillow or realtor.com. When a seller wants to put their property on the market, they typically list it with a real estate agent. The agent in turn enters the details of the property into MLS. And that's how other agents can access this information to find suitable properties for their buyers. That's why it's helpful to work with a realtor, because they have access to this information. Also, explore social media for potential leads. Some communities have active real estate groups or Facebook groups where upcoming home listings are regularly discussed and posted. The next tip is a bit controversial, but most people who have applied this tip have done very well for themselves. If you are someone who enjoys fixing things around the house, another option is to buy a fixer-upper and gradually renovate it. If you watch HGTV, you probably know what a fixer-upper is. A typically older home with modern upgrades that require repairs. And why is it a good option? Well, since these properties require a lot of work, the prices are usually lower, offering the possibility to find a great deal. However, know that a house needing substantial upgrades may come with hidden costs as you dive into repairs. Experience is valuable in this situation, so make sure you get a home inspection or work with a realtor who is experienced in estimating rehab costs. Keep in mind that while you can improve a home, you cannot change its location. If you take this route, I would highly recommend you choose a fixer-upper that is in a desirable neighborhood where you yourself wouldn't mind living. Otherwise, you may regret your decision if you dislike the surroundings or property values start to decline. Renovating a home requires both time and money, and budgets and timelines often expand with this type of projects. Key areas to focus on is electrical, plumbing, foundation, HVAC system, and roofing. You can also consider an FHA 203k loan, which allows you to finance both the mortgage and the rehab in a single mortgage. FHA loans generally have lower credit score requirement, and the down payments could be as low as 3.5%. And perhaps the most important advice I could give you is, if you have lost out on a few homes, resist the urge to outbid too much out of desperation. Bidding too high or settling for a home that you really don't like can lead to regret later on, because you would be sticking with this house for at least a few years. I've seen that way too many times. On the other hand, if you're not sure, it might be better to stick to renting for the time being while you gather more funds, improve your credit score, and refine your home preferences. Feeling frustrated is normal in this situation. Trust me, I've been there. And since you can't control how competitive the real estate market is, focus on what you can control. Learn what's a reasonable offer in your area and keep your home wish list realistic. And make sure your finances are in order. This way, when the right house does come along, you'll be prepared with the right offer. I will end with this. Even in this crazy market, some good opportunities are popping up. Just a few weeks back, I successfully closed a deal on a single-family house. I signed on a 7.6% interest rate. I'll dive into the full numbers in another video, but long story short, initially when I crunched the numbers with the 7.6 interest rate, the deal just did not make sense, so I walked away from the deal. However, the following day brought a surprising twist. My realtor reached out to me and informed me that the seller was open to offering a $20,000 discount. The numbers still did not make sense, and I promise you I wasn't playing hardball. The numbers just didn't add up. It's all about the math, so I respectfully declined again. And 2 hours later, they offered a $40,000 discount off the listing price, and this obviously caught my attention. I reran the numbers with the discounted price, and the deal finally made sense, or somewhat made sense. The numbers are not too great, but the cash-on-cash return was around 13%. I usually like this number to be slightly higher. But like I said, location is important, and this house is in a very nice location with a great school district, so I closed the deal. The takeaway here is that opportunities are indeed there, and sellers are increasingly open to negotiation. It's a departure from the previous norm where properties attracted a flood of 20 offers before you could even connect with the realtor. Now it's a great time, in my opinion at least, to go out and start your research.